Welcome to CloudLanes and the CloudLanes Backup Accelerator. This series of videos will show you first how to download the correct image for your particular hypervisor and to deploy that image properly. Step 2 will be to configure your cloud storage account or accounts in your cloud storage provider. Step 3 will be to create the Backup Accelerator Vault, where we store all the data that you back up, first initially on premises and then moving it to the cloud. The fourth step is connecting the Windows server on which you are running your backup software to the CloudLanes Backup Accelerator with the iSCSI initiator. The final video will be a walkthrough for configuring with best practices your backup software and running through all the functionality to backup and restore using the CloudLanes Backup Accelerator. This is the first video in the series where we'll demonstrate how to deploy your CloudLanes Backup Accelerator to your hypervisor. The CloudLanes Backup Accelerator, or CBA, may be deployed either to Hyper-V version 2008 R2 or above, or VMware vSphere version 5.5 or above. In this first demonstration, we will deploy the CBA to Hyper-V. Here, you can see I've downloaded the image for Hyper-V, simply a VHDX file. We will create a new VM and then attach to this disk for boot. But we have a couple more things to do as well that I'll show during this demonstration. Now, in Hyper-V, what you will want to do when downloading that image is to copy it to the destination on your Hyper-V server where you want to run the VM. The actual destination, since we will be attaching the disk. Just for this demonstration, I've saved the image to my desktop and will point to that when I create the new VM. Simply open Hyper-V Manager, New, Virtual Machine, give it a name, choose Generation 1, Startup Memory. The CloudLanes CBA requires 32 gig of RAM, although you may specify dynamic memory. Choose an Ethernet connection, one of your Hyper-V virtual switches, in order to connect a single interface. On this screen, we will use an existing virtual disk. Simply browse to where you place the file and continue. And then finish. Now, what we just did was deploy the CloudLanes CBA software. The next step is to add a data disk that will be used for the local landing zone space where your backups will be ingested before they are sent up to the cloud. Simply edit the settings of that virtual machine. Click on SCSI controller, hard drive, add. Now, if you do have physical pass-through disk available, we suggest that you choose that. The point of the landing zone disk is that we want it to be as fast as possible, since that will directly affect our ingest speed and our egress speed when we're sending data up to the cloud. If not, you can use a virtual hard disk, though we recommend thick provisioning that disk. In this case, I have a 30 terabyte disk iSCSI connected to the Hyper-V server, and I'm going to choose that for my landing zone space. Recommendations on sizing this disk can be found in the administrator guide, but a good starting point is simply take the size of the largest full backup that you typically perform and create the disk slightly larger than that. Again, the idea is that we will back up initially to this landing zone space, and then we will export that data, moving it up to the cloud, which will then clear up that landing zone space for the next backup. So again, a starting point, take the largest full backup size, create your landing zone disk, and make it slightly larger than that. Again, in this case, I do have plenty of disk space available, so I'm actually going to give it 30 terabytes. The next thing we need to do while we're in here in settings is alter virtual processor settings. The CloudLanes Backup Accelerator requires 8 virtual processors, so we'll specify that, and that's it. Again, verifying 32 gig of RAM, 8 virtual processors. We have deployed our OS and CloudLanes software disk. We have added this new landing zone disk under SCSI controller, and we'll simply hit OK. Next, Simply start the virtual machine and open a console. Once you arrive at the login prompt, simply log in with the default account of CLAdmin and the password that was provided to you. Your deployment is now complete. Proceed with video number 2, which will demonstrate how to configure your CBA cloud storage. Next, we will deploy the CBA with VMware. Note that I am deploying directly to vSphere. If you're using vCenter, refer to the VMware Administrator Guides for your options for deployment. In the vSphere client, click on File and Deploy OVF Template. Choose the location where you place the file. Note that you should not upload this file to one of your VMware data stores. You should store it locally on the machine from which you are running the vSphere client. Click Next. Note here that the size on disk will be 30 gigabytes when thick provisioned, which is what we will want to do. Let's give it a name. Choose a resource pool if you have one configured. Choose the data store on which we will be deploying this VM image. Thick provisioned, as I mentioned earlier. Do not power on after deployment. Once complete, edit the settings of the virtual machine. Verify that memory is 32 gigabytes and 8 virtual CPUs are specified. Note here we have a single hard disk, which is the one we just deployed, which is the VM image for the CBA. The next step is to add our landing zone disk. Again, as with the Hyper-V portion, this is the place where your backups will initially land before they are moved up to the cloud. Add a hard disk. And also, as with Hyper-V, if you do have RDM capable disks available, that is straight disk pass-through, you should use that to get maximum performance, but you certainly can create a new virtual disk and place it on one of your data stores. We recommend the fastest possible storage available, since that will directly affect both ingest rate and egress rate when we are moving data up to the cloud. In this case, I do have an RDM disk available. It's an iSCSI disk. Store it with the virtual machine, physical compatibility, accept the default, and finish. Click OK. When complete, start the virtual machine and open a console. When you arrive at the login prompt, specify the default account of CLAdmin and the password you were provided. Your deployment is now complete. Proceed with video number 2, configuring your CBA cloud storage.